It's been years now that people have been asking for pretty much the same three things on their X-T2 and X-T3s. Fujifilm's been listening to that feedback and they've come around to deliver on those requests big time. So I'm going to talk about those three things and a few other added features that they've packed into this Fujifilm X-T4 coming up. Hey everybody, my name is Seth and down below is my dog Emma. It's really windy outside today, so we had to bring this video inside the Airstream. Thanks to my wife for going for a walk. There are a ton of new features they packed into this new X-T4. I could make a 25-minute talking head video, but I'm not going to put you through that kind of torture. So that's why I condensed it down to three things that I'm stoked on. And there's also a few little things that I wish were a little bit better, and I'll add those in there as well. Fujifilm has not paid me to make this video for you. It is not sponsored in any way. I am an official Fujifilm X photographer, so I might be a little biased, but these are all my honest-to-God opinions on this camera. Okay, so number one, probably not a big surprise to a lot of you, is the IBIS, the in-body image stabilization. So the X-T4 has that 5-axis image stabilization built in here. The IBIS, when it's combined with lenses that have the optical image stabilization, can produce up to 6.5 stops of stabilization. Otherwise, with just regular prime lenses like this 16mm 1.4, we're just getting about 5 stops of stabilization, which is still pretty dang good considering prime lenses don't have any stabilization otherwise. So far, it's been working very well, especially for photography and static video shots. Again, this is a pre-production model, so it's not final firmware, but this early version has been a little choppy during panning and walking. Keep in mind that IBIS is not meant to be a gimbal replacement. I've noticed that the IBIS really excels for just regular static handheld shots, whether it's photography or video. Okay, so there's 3 different options you can have with the image stabilization. You can have it on and working in conjunction with the lens stabilization. You can have it on and working with the digital image stabilization. And then the other option is to have it on and have the image stabilization boosted into boost mode. If you have a prime lens, then you can just shut the whole stabilization off. With the IBIS in this X-T4, I'm pretty amazed. It's not that much bigger of a camera. I actually keep confusing it with my old X-T3. It is a little bit beefier, and you notice it when you're holding it because it is an upgrade in the ergonomics. There's a little bit more to hold on to, which is nice when you're shooting for long periods of time. But if you're just to glance at it from the top, it honestly, I mean, it looks a lot like the X-T3 does. So I'm really amazed that they were able to add the IBIS in here without a huge bump in the size of the camera. Fujifilm is reporting that compared to the X-H1, the built-in IBIS is 30% smaller and 20% lighter. And yeah, if you're one of the few people who are IBIS haters and you don't actually want the IBIS in here, just shut it off. And the camera is barely even bigger. There's no compromises for that IBIS mechanism inside there. And of course, one of the major advantages to a slightly larger body is going to be a larger battery. Yes, this is something that we've all been looking forward to. We now have a 2200 milliamp battery capacity. That's almost twice as much as the last battery. And what that is going to do for us is give us 50% more shooting time or 50% more shots. So yeah, that is a major win right there. Okay, so moving along to point number 2, that is going to be the hybrid shooting capabilities. So this little switch right here is my best friend. I absolutely love that now I can switch between still and movie, just like that. Boom, boom. So with the previous generations, with the X-H1 and the X-T3, etc., you could always save your movie settings independently, you know, your film simulations, your white balance, your tone curve, your sharpness, etc. All of that was saved independently from the still photos, but you had to go into the movie silent setting and turn that on to keep your exposure settings independent. It was a kind of an awkward workaround. It, albeit effective, it was just a clunky compromise, but now the switch makes it so that when I'm shooting still photos and I switch it to movie, I have my shutter speed where I want it, I have my f-stop where I want it. It's all retained from the last time I shot video. I can have my exposure settings mapped to the command dials now, so that is awesome. The rear command wheel, I can change my shutter speed. The front command wheel, I'll change my f-stop. And that just makes the workflow so much smoother because I'm not going through that little tiny thing on the... That feature might not be as impressive to some of the rest of you, but for me as a hybrid shooter, I do a lot of still photos in conjunction with video on some of my assignments, and actually quite a few assignments and personal work. If you're still unclear about what that switch means, go into the comments, hit me up down there, and I'll give you a more detailed explanation. And speaking of frame rates, Fujifilm decided to give us 240 frames per second. The old 120 frames per second, I guess it just wasn't good enough, but now it's even better. I actually went and shot a bunch of Slowmo stuff on the Glamis sand dunes in Southern California. Cue some of that Slowmo B-roll. And action. In general, I was really happy with the high speed frame rate, but there was a little bit of mosaicing. You can see in the finer details in the backgrounds of the sand dunes, there was a little mosaicing happening down there. So hopefully that'll get a little better with some of the firmware upgrades, but you know, 240 frames per second at 1080p is pretty dang nice. Okay, and just one little gripe, or one thing that would make that feature better is when you switch into high-speed frame rate, it would be nice though if it automatically kicked into the 180-degree shutter rule, which would make that shutter speed 1/500. Maybe a firmware upgrade will address that. Okay, and number 3 is definitely one of the biggest things I've seen people asking for on an XT camera, and that is the swivel screen. This is something that I know not everybody is going to love, but for people like me who are obviously on YouTube, I'm on YouTube right now, or people who are the star of their own productions, this swivel screen is a game changer. And I shot a vlog last week with this camera. I'll link it up here or down in the description if you want to go check that out. It performs just as well as you'd want it to. It feels really solid. It's smooth. One extra little bonus on the swivel screen is that you can flip it around and make it so that there's no LCD at all. So that's really nice if you want to protect your LCD screen from scratches or dust or nose grease. It's almost like the X Pro 3 in that regard. You could shut the LCD off and just use the EVF if you wanted to cut down on those distractions and have a little more restraint. You can go that route now by just flipping the screen around. So yeah, the swivel screen is awesome. I did have a little gripe about it. When you put a you know, like a Rode mic on top of here, the side flap has to come open, and then that flap is now blocking your swivel screen, and you're actually not able to see your metering on the left side. But I was able to work around that. There's a little twist and tuck technique that I figured out, so it manages to stay out of the way most of the time. But I just wish that these little doors on the left side of the camera could come off like they do over here on the SD card side. Especially because your second door down here is your HDMI out and also your USB-C. for audio monitoring. These are just things that video shooters are going to use a lot, and it would be nice if the doors just came off. Yeah, so those are the three main things that I wanted to talk about, but there are a few other little bonus features packed into here that I'll go ahead and add on since you're still watching. Okay guys, that about wraps it up. I hope you got some value out of this video, or at least found it entertaining. If so, hit the thumbs up, consider subscribing, and hit that notification bell. I do videos like this on occasion, but also I do a lot of traveling, adventure, lifestyle photography where I teach tips and tricks and do vlogs from my travels on the road. So if that's something you're interested in, I'd love to have you follow along, and I'll see you down the road. Let there be light. Now that people have pretty much been asking for the same 3 features on their Fujifilm. Gosh, I'm listening to that feedback, and they've addressed those. This is painful. Oh shit, I don't have an SD card now. I love, and number 1 is gonna be the. It's okay, Emma. It's okay. But now,